What happened when an undercover CEO walked into his own public library disguised as a janitor? He uncovered a quiet cruelty that had gone unnoticed for far too long. Welcome, dear listeners. You've got great taste for meaningful stories that touch the heart and stir the soul. Today's tale is more than just a twist of identity. It's a journey of justice, dignity, and redemption. If you believe that kindness still matters and every voice deserves to be heard, this story is for you. So sit back, relax, and let us take you to Willow Glen Library, where everything changed in 1 week. They said a library couldn't be cruel, that it was just books and silence. How bad could it be? But as Ethan Bradford stood in the parking lot of Willow Glen Library, his breath fogging in the early morning air, he knew better. He had built this place with love, dedicated it to his mother, a lifelong teacher who believed books could save lives. For 10 years, Willow Glen had been more than a building. It was the second home for struggling kids, lonely retirees, and anyone who needed warmth between its shelves. But now, after being away to care for his dying father, Ethan had received 3 anonymous letters. Each described a different face of the same rot: a young man mocked for his speech, staff morale shattered, and management turning a blind eye to cruelty. One letter ended with a plea: someone has to do something before they break him. That him was Noah Tran, a quiet bookshelver Ethan had personally hired years ago. Noah had a stutter, but also a near-encyclopedic memory and hands that restored century-old bindings with reverence. Ethan remembered the first day Noah came in, nervous, fidgeting, afraid of being dismissed. Ethan had seen his brother Michael in him. Same tremble in the hands, same anxious eyes. Michael hadn't survived a world that mocked what it didn't understand. Ethan wouldn't let history repeat itself. So now, dressed in faded coveralls and scuffed boots, Ethan pulled a worn cap over his graying hair and stepped through the automatic doors. No one looked up. No one recognized him. The hum of fluorescent lights replaced the laughter he once loved here. The reading nook was gone, replaced by a self-checkout kiosk. A laminated sign read, "Budget cuts. Thanks for understanding." And he picked up his mop. He caught a glimpse of Noah in the far aisle, carefully stacking books with quiet precision. Behind him, 2 librarians laughed as one mimicked a stutter. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. They said a library couldn't be cruel. But cruelty doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers between shelves, and sometimes it's hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to see it and say, "Enough." Ethan tightened his grip on the mop handle. It was time to clean the house. The moment Ethan stepped into the main hall of Willow Glen Library, the shift was palpable. The scent of old books and lemon polish was still there, but the warmth was gone. The vibrant bulletin board, once covered with handmade bookmarks from school children, had been replaced with corporate flyers about policy updates. The cozy storytelling mural his mother had painted with a group of local artists, a whimsical forest filled with animals reading books, had been painted over with sterile beige. It felt like a hospital hallway, not the sanctuary it used to be. Ethan moved slowly, pushing his mop bucket, absorbing every hollow smile and every silence that followed footsteps. A few patrons lingered in the reading area, but even they seemed disconnected, hunched over devices rather than browsing shelves. Staff moved past him like ghosts, heads down, voices low, energy drained. It wasn't just the decor that had changed, it was the soul of the place. Near the circulation desk, he spotted Noah Tran. The young man was a little older than Ethan remembered, his back slightly more hunched, his clothes faded and worn. Noah's hands moved with practiced care, aligning books on a cart with near mechanical precision. But his eyes told another story, a quiet, enduring exhaustion. Ethan watched as Noah shuffled past 2 senior librarians, Jessica and Brielle, who were huddled near the reference desk giggling about something on Brielle's phone. As Noah passed, Jessica nudged Brielle and said in a stage whisper, "Here comes Mr. Can't Finish a Sentence." Brielle burst out laughing, covering her mouth like a teenager caught gossiping. Noah didn't react, just kept walking, head slightly lower. Ethan's blood chilled. In the past, that kind of cruelty wouldn't have lasted 5 seconds under his watch. But now no one said a word. Not the patrons, not the other staff, not even Scott Lanning, the new library director, who glanced up from his office window and then immediately looked back down at his laptop. The man hadn't even left his office to greet the morning team. Ethan shook his head and gripped the mop handle tighter. Willow Glen had once been a safe harbor, a tribute to his mother's belief that every soul deserved to feel seen. Now it was just another place where the quietest people suffered most. Dust gathered in corners no one cleaned. Smiles came out cold. The legacy he'd built was cracking, and no one inside even noticed the sound. Ethan had always believed that if cruelty existed, it would be loud, slamming doors, raised voices, open insults. But at Willow Glen it was quiet, subtle, cowardly, the kind that crept behind closed office doors and nestled between hushed conversations by the printer. Over the course of several days, pushing his mop cart down familiar aisles, Ethan started hearing things. Fragments of conversation not meant for his ears. Why do we even keep him around? Jessica's voice drifted from the break room one afternoon. Ethan paused just outside the door, wiping a perfectly clean spot on the floor. He's sweet, sure, Brielle chimed in with a laugh, but it takes him 20 minutes to ask if someone wants a library card. He's a walking delay. Jessica snorted. Honestly, it's painful. Have you ever heard him on the phone? That poor patron last week had to repeat herself 5 times before he finished a sentence. More laughter. Ethan clenched his jaw as he kept wiping. Later, while organizing the mop closet, he heard Scott Lanning chatting with the head of facilities. I'd get rid of the shelver, that Noah kid, but HR would probably cry foul. He checks too many boxes. Neurodivergent, first-generation speech things. It's not worth the paperwork. They both chuckled. Ethan's stomach turned. Noah wasn't a box, he was a human being. A damn good one. 5 years of dependable work. Ethan remembered him volunteering extra hours during the summer reading program, shelving until dusk while others took breaks. And this is how they talked about him? Like a burden? Back in the stacks, Ethan watched Noah lift a heavy cart with worn wrists and a limp more pronounced than before. No one offered to help. Patrons walked past him as if he were invisible. When he accidentally dropped a book, a teenage page rolled her eyes and muttered, "Great, more cleanup." The culture had shifted while Ethan was gone, not into outright cruelty, but into a collective shrug, a culture of complicity. No one dared to stand up. No one wanted to be next. That evening, as the library emptied and the last light flickered over the children's wing, Ethan sat in the janitor's supply closet and played back the audio from the hidden recorder he'd planted in the staff lounge. The whispers were there, ugly, dismissive, small, but they echoed loudly in his heart. This wasn't just about Noah anymore. It was about what Willow Glen had become, a place where good people were chewed up in silence, and the worst ones laughed softly while no one stopped them. That was going to change. It happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon, one of those slow library days when even the clock seemed to yawn. Ethan was wiping down the glass doors near the reference section when he heard it, the familiar snicker of Jessica, followed by Brielle's exaggerated stammer. Do you want a book bag?" she mocked, holding a library tote to her chest as if cradling it like a joke. A few patrons glanced up but quickly looked away. Noah stood nearby, clutching a stack of returns, his face blank. His silence was heartbreaking. Not the kind born of resignation, but the kind molded by years of learned helplessness. That's when someone finally said something. "That's enough," came a voice, young, firm, and steady. Everyone turned. Marcus, the teenage volunteer who spent afternoons reshelving in the youth wing, had stepped forward. His arms were crossed, his brow furrowed. "You don't talk to people like that, especially not someone who works harder than both of you combined." Jessica scoffed. "Stay out of this, kid, it's just a joke." Marcus didn't flinch. "Then maybe you should try being funny without hurting people." Brielle opened her mouth to respond, but Marcus had already turned to Noah, gently taking the stack of books from his arms. "I'll help you with these." Noah gave a small nod. his lips twitching in what might have been the beginning of a smile. Ethan watched from a few feet away, pride swelling in his chest. Here was a 16-year-old showing more backbone than most adults in the building. After the moment passed, Ethan caught up with Marcus in the break room under the pretense of emptying the trash. "That was brave," he said, keeping his voice low. Marcus shrugged. "It just didn't feel right, letting them keep doing that. Noah's never been anything but nice to me." He paused. "I wish Clara were still here. She would have stopped them too." Clara? The name landed like a spark in Ethan's mind. Clara Jennings, the former assistant director who'd mysteriously resigned months after Ethan left. She'd been loyal, ethical, and deeply respected by the staff. And if Marcus remembered her that fondly, maybe she hadn't left by choice. That night, Ethan pulled up his old contact list. It was time to find Clara. If anyone knew how deep this problem ran and how to help fix it, it was her. Ethan met Clara Jennings at a small cafe 3 towns over, away from curious eyes and gossip-prone staffers. She arrived exactly on time, dressed in a dark wool coat, her once sunny demeanor now shadowed by exhaustion. As she sat across from him, there was no small talk, just a quiet, measured breath before she said, "You finally came back." Ethan nodded, guilt weighing down his shoulders. Clara had been his right hand for nearly 7 years. The organizational backbone of Willow Glen, and a tireless advocate for every employee, especially the overlooked. "What happened?" he asked gently. She shook her head, eyes scanning the chipped rim of her coffee mug. "Became their easy target, Ethan. Noah. After you left, Scott took over and everything changed. Staff meetings were cut, programming was gutted. Any complaint about behavior was dismissed as personality friction. I tried to document things, tried to file reports." Her voice trembled slightly. "But the worst part wasn't Scott. It was the way Jessica and Brielle realized they could get away with anything, as long as they kept the numbers looking good." She paused, then added, "Noah was quiet, dependable, and vulnerable. They dumped the worst tasks on him, mocked him when he was out of earshot, or sometimes when he wasn't, and no one stopped them because no one wanted to be next." Ethan sat still, fists clenched under the table. "Why didn't you tell me directly?" he asked. "I tried," she said, meeting his eyes. "But your number changed. I left messages with the management company, emails, nothing. And then one day I found myself written up for insubordination and inappropriate conduct. It was retaliation, plain and simple. They gave me a choice: resign quietly or face a formal investigation and damage to my career. I didn't have the strength to fight it alone." Her words were sharp but calm, like someone who had cried all their tears already. Ethan felt his stomach twist. He had trusted that company to maintain his standards while he cared for his dying father. Instead, they had dismantled everything he'd built. "Clara," he said, voice low, "I need your help. I'm going to fix this, but I can't do it alone." She looked at him for a long moment before nodding. "If we're doing this, we do it right. We document everything. We protect Noah, and we don't stop until this place is safe again." Ethan exhaled slowly. For the first time since walking through those doors in disguise, he felt the first flicker of hope. Willow Glen might still be broken, but it wasn't beyond repair. Clara's return reignited something Ethan hadn't realized he'd lost: momentum. With her sharp instincts and deep understanding of the library's inner workings, they moved quickly. They met nightly, combing through personnel files Clara had archived, cross-referencing incident reports, or the suspicious lack of them, and drawing lines between enablers and victims. Ethan had already planted 2 audio recorders, one behind the staff lounge clock, and another cleverly hidden beneath the reference desk printer. The recordings were damning. Jessica mocking Noah's speech, Brielle giggling as she recounted piling extra closing duties on him just for fun, and Scott brushing off a junior employee's concerns with, "Noah should be grateful he's even employed." Ethan documented every second. Marcus, the teen volunteer, offered help too, quietly interviewing other staff members and even patrons who had noticed the shift in atmosphere over the past year. "It's like the air got heavier," one elderly woman told him. "Nobody smiles here anymore." Once they had enough, Clara proposed the setup, a fabricated board appreciation night where key staff would be gathered under the guise of a surprise donor presentation. "It has to be big, public, and undeniable," she said, "so no one can spin it or sweep it under the rug." Ethan agreed, but before they moved forward, there was one more step, talking to Noah himself. They couldn't stage a public reckoning on his behalf without his consent. One evening after close, Ethan found Noah shelving in the nonfiction aisle, quiet as always, focused as ever. When Ethan gently revealed who he was and explained what they had uncovered, Noah's face didn't register shock, only weariness. "I know what they say about me," he murmured. "I don't need revenge." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's not about revenge. It's about restoring what was stolen, not just from you, but from this place." Noah was silent for a long time. Then slowly, he nodded. "Do it. Not just for me. Do it for Clara, for Marcus, for the ones who quit, before they broke too." That was all Ethan needed to hear. The wheels were in motion, and in just a few days, Willow Glen Library would be the site of a very different kind of story time, one where silence would no longer be mistaken for peace, and the quietest voices would finally be heard. Friday evening arrived cloaked in expectation. The library's private reading room, rarely used except for donor visits or author talks, had been transformed, per Ethan's precise instructions. A long conference table stood at the center, surrounded by neatly arranged chairs, fresh flowers, and a small podium at the front. Staff had been told a wealthy patron was considering a sizable endowment, and Director Scott Lanning, always eager to impress potential donors, had eagerly assembled the team. Jessica and Brielle arrived in crisp blouses and fake smiles, whispering behind clipboards. Noah stood in the back unsure, flanked quietly by Marcus and Clara, who now held her chin a little higher. Ethan entered the room in a tailored navy suit, his graying hair neatly combed, beard trimmed. Gone was the mop, the worn cap, the faded janitor uniform. For a moment, no one recognized him, until he stepped to the podium, faced the room, and said in a calm, clear voice, "My name is Ethan Bradford. I'm the founder of Willow Glen Library." Gasps rippled. Scott visibly paled. Jessica's smirk faltered. Brielle dropped her pen. Ethan let the silence stretch before continuing. "For the last 2 weeks I've been here undercover, observing, listening, and what I've heard has shaken me to my core." He tapped his phone, and the room filled with voices. Jessica mocking Noah's stutter, Brielle bragging about sabotaging his workload, Scott's indifference captured in chilling apathy. No one could speak. Ethan's voice stayed measured but firm. This library was built on the belief that everyone deserves respect, access, and dignity. What I've seen here betrays that mission. He turned to Clara. "Clara Jennings is hereby reinstated as acting director, effective immediately." Then to Scott, "Your employment with Willow Glen is terminated, effective now. You will leave the premises after this meeting and will not return." Jessica stood up, face flushed. "This isn't fair. We were just joking." Ethan's gaze didn't waver. Harassment isn't a joke. Targeting someone's disability isn't harmless. And your behavior has no place here. Brielle tried to deflect. "It's not like we were the only ones." But Ethan held up a hand. "You made your choices, and now you face the consequences." He then turned to Noah. "This man, who you all underestimated, embodies the very best of Willow Glen. Starting today, he's being promoted to collections supervisor with full benefits, adjusted responsibilities, and the respect he's always deserved." Noah looked stunned. For a moment, it seemed he might refuse, but then, slowly, he nodded. The room stayed silent. As Ethan concluded, "This is the new chapter. Anyone who wants to be part of a better Willow Glen can stay. But the days of silence and cruelty are over." And just like that, the reckoning had arrived. The next morning, Willow Glen Library felt different. Sunlight streamed through the tall front windows with a warmth that hadn't been felt in months. The tension that had once clung to the air like dust had lifted. At 8 a.m., staff trickled into the community room where Ethan and Clara had arranged a casual breakfast of coffee, fresh bagels, and pastries from a local bakery. No suits, no speeches. Just an invitation that read, "To new beginnings, let's talk." Even those who had been unsure, interns, part-timers, and longtime staff who had quietly endured the past year, showed up, some still hesitant, others relieved. Ethan stood at the front, sleeves rolled, a coffee mug in hand. "Thank you all for coming," he began, voice steady but warm. "I know this week was a lot, and I know trust doesn't come back overnight. But it starts now." He paused, scanning familiar faces, some sheepish, some hopeful. This library was built to be a haven, a place where no one felt small, where everyone's voice mattered. He gestured to the bulletin board behind him, now restored with hand-drawn bookmarks from local kids, community announcements, and an old photograph of his mother reading to children. "We lost our way, but we're finding it again, together." Clara stepped forward next. "Starting this week, we're reinstating staff meals and team huddles. A zero-tolerance policy for bullying is now active, and we'll be opening a private channel for anonymous feedback, so if something's wrong, we'll know." There was a small ripple of quiet nods. "More than anything," she continued, "we want this to be a place where people want to come to work again." Then came the moment that drew everyone in. Ethan called Noah up to the front, not to speak, but to be recognized. Dressed in a crisp navy button-down shirt and khakis, Noah looked every bit the professional his new title reflected. Collections supervisor. A few staff clapped, then more joined in. Not the awkward forced applause of obligation, but something genuine. Clara smiled and added, "Noah is proof that quiet strength still matters, and we're lucky to have him." As the breakfast wrapped and people refilled their coffee, something shifted. Staff lingered a little longer. Conversations sparked naturally. Laughter returned, not the cruel kind, but the real kind. And as Ethan watched from the edge of the room, he felt it. This wasn't just a rebuilding. It was a rebirth. The soul of Willow Glen was coming back to life, one act of decency at a time. Monday morning at Willow Glen Library arrived not with fanfare, but with a calm, purposeful energy. The fluorescent lights, once cold and clinical, now glowed with quiet warmth, as if the very building had exhaled. Shelves were neater, bulletin boards freshly decorated, and the old children's reading nook had been cleared of its storage boxes and reimagined with soft cushions and vibrant posters. At the heart of it all was Noah Tran, wearing a crisp name tag that now read Noah Tran, Collections Supervisor. He moved through the library with quiet confidence. No longer hunched or hurried, he walked with intention, his limp still present, but no longer the thing that defined him. He paused in front of a glass display case near the entrance, a small exhibit he had curated over the weekend. Inside were beautifully restored antique books from the library's archives, once relegated to the back storage room. Beside each book was a note in Noah's careful handwriting, explaining the history and significance of each item. Patrons stopped to admire the display, reading his notes with quiet reverence. One elderly woman leaned over to a younger man and said, "I remember that book from when I was a girl. I didn't think I'd ever see it again." Behind the circulation desk, Clara watched Noah work, her expression soft. Ethan stood beside her, arms folded. "I forgot how much heart this place could have," he said quietly. Clara nodded. It never left. It was just waiting for someone to uncover it again. Near the back corner, Marcus restocked the children's section, humming to himself. He gave Noah a thumbs up across the aisle, and Noah returned a small smile, genuine and easy. A far cry from the guarded silence Ethan had first seen in him. Noah's final task that morning was simple but symbolic. He retrieved a book long overdue for repair, a classic fairy tale anthology, well-loved and barely holding together. He sat at the restoration table, gently brushing dust from the cover and inspecting the binding with skilled hands. As he applied fresh adhesive to the spine, his eyes reflected calm focus, not the anxiety of someone trying to disappear, but the care of someone who understood his value. From the mezzanine above, Ethan watched it all unfold. The bruises left by neglect and cruelty hadn't fully healed, but healing had begun, and as Noah looked up from his work, catching Ethan's gaze, he mouthed two words with complete clarity and gratitude. "Thank you." Ethan nodded back, heart full. At that moment, the library wasn't just functioning, it was alive again. The story of Willow Glen Library teaches a powerful lesson. Silence can be just as harmful as cruelty, and dignity must be defended, not assumed. At its heart, the tale reveals how toxic cultures thrive, not because of a few bad people, but because too many good people stay quiet. Noah Tran, a quiet, diligent employee with a speech impediment, suffered daily humiliations in plain sight until someone finally listened. Ethan Bradford's return as an undercover founder reminds us that leadership isn't just about policies or profit, but about protecting people and honoring the values on which institutions are built. The story also highlights the strength of community, how one teenager's courage, a former manager's integrity, and a founder's accountability can reverse injustice when they act together. In restoring the library's soul, they not only gave Noah his voice, they reminded everyone that respect, kindness, and decency must be actively practiced. The true measure of any workplace or institution is not in its success on paper, but in how it treats the most vulnerable among them. And perhaps most importantly, the story shows that it's never too late to return, to repair, and to do what's right.